Okay, I will talk as loud as possible because we don't have mics in here. Today's lesson, for today I'll be Mrs. Paluck, and then tomorrow that will just be my mother-in-law's name and I'll go back to Renee. But for today we're Mrs. Paluck. We're going to go over navigating the NAR settlement changes, and I'm going to gear this a little more towards the loan officers because I think real estate agents, they've been feeding this into our brains since March of 2024. But I think there's little nuances that we should all know about, and this is kind of an open format, so if there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand, or any input. We're going to do a little roundtable session at the end, because I think one of the most important things is learning from experience and kind of talking about what you're seeing out there, what roadblocks there may be, what hurdles and things. So we're going to start with a little overview here.
You are making $500,000 and you're only going to pay me 30?
You're getting 30 grand? I'm getting 1,000.
You guys are getting paid?
So in all seriousness, so a little overview of the lawsuit. I think we all kind of know. In 2019, a group of sellers got together, filed a class action lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors and a couple of the larger brokers, claiming antitrust violations and alleging the association's practices inflated commissions. The sellers claimed that the payment arrangement encouraged agents to steer buyers towards listings that were offering a higher commission, and so that would be sort of like a steering and anti-competitive. So NAR has not admitted to any wrongdoing, so instead they settled. And in March of 2024, they agreed to pay $418 million in damages, and the agreement would release NAR and any realtor associations, any agents affiliated with those associations from any liability from that lawsuit. So with the lawsuit came some pretty important changes, the biggest changes that I think the real estate industry has seen in a really long time. So what has changed? The biggest change is the requirement for a buyer representation agreement. There's no compensation listed on the MLS, and then no more cooperating broker compensation. And we're going to go over each of these one by one. So in front of you is the California version of the buyer representation agreement. Agents all throughout the country are going to be required to sign one of these. This is the specific one that CAR put out. In, I think, July, they put out 29 new forms. So there was like a ton of changes that happened, all these little nuances that we have to be aware of. So, and I think from a loan officer perspective, it's really important to know the changes as well, so you can be helpful to your agents if they miss something, or just know what they're up against, really, because it's going to be a little bit of a challenging time. So before a buyer's agent can take a buyer to see a property, or even send them a virtual tour of a property, you have to have a buyer representation agreement of some sort in place. This is the long version. There is a shorter version. This is the one that's going to be used 99% of the time, the one that you have in front of you. So it spells out what the buyer's agent's responsibilities are. It records how the agent will be paid, and it ensures the buyer that they have an expert helping them through this process. So this is going to be your number one conversation if you're representing a buyer. It's going to be the most important piece of paper that you have in order for you to get paid one way or another. So I highlighted on your forms the most important pieces. The section A1 at the top, this cannot exceed 3 months, not even by a day. It would be null and void. So that representation agreement, only 3 months. It defaults to non-exclusive unless this, I don't know my little laser, right here, this little exclusive box, it defaults to non-exclusive. So essentially a buyer could have 5 of these agreements signed if they're not exclusive. They can have 3 agents in San Diego, they can have 1 in Orange County, whatever it may be. So it's probably best that you get an exclusive to be able to protect your commission.
What are the practical implications if somebody signs more than one as exclusive?
they would be, if they go into escrow on a property, they could be liable to pay both agents the commission.
For the same property.
Yes, yes. For any property that they go in, because it's an exclusive contract. So even if they go to see a property that you might not have, that they didn't show, it's an exclusive agreement. So essentially, they still would owe on that
Or if
transaction.
one of the agreements was exclusive and the rest weren't, they went with somebody that was non-exclusive. The one that had the exclusive could go.
Has a right for the commission still, yes. Okay, so like I said, defaults to being non-exclusive. Here's the biggest thing. The agent cannot be paid more than what is stated in the BRBC down on E1. So here we have 2.5%, which is pretty much the standard. If a seller pays the commission, then the buyer is not obligated to pay you, is basically what the section says down here. So if the broker receives compensation from the seller or others for broker's representation, the amount shall be credited against buyer's obligation to pay broker. So if the seller is willing to pay 2.5%, the buyer owes you nothing. If the seller is willing to pay 2%, the buyer would be obligated to pay you that additional 0.5%. Then on the other end of that, if the seller is willing to pay 3% and you only have 2.5 on here, you cannot get the 3%. You forego that additional 0.5%. No compensation listed on the MLS anymore. So this is taken from CRMLS, which I think a lot of people, if you have access, this is the one that you access. They changed it, so it'll show whether the seller is considering concessions, which to me is the code word for they're willing to pay a commission. So you'll see here, this one defaults to yes. This one says no, so this seller may not be willing to pay a commission. This one, the listing agent has not gotten around to changing or putting their answer. So that's something that it's kind of unknown. There is a MLS up in the Bay Area called Berries. They just emailed and said there is going to be a complete change. They're taking this section off their MLS altogether. So whether others will follow suit, I don't know. But that might be gone. And so we've only been navigating these changes since August 17th. So we're only about 45 days into this. So we're seeing changes on a weekly basis. Carr mentioned that they're probably going to even have to change some of the forms because they get feedback from the members, what's working, what's not. And so we're going to just see a lot of changes throughout this, this change. So the listing agreement, they redid as well. That explains what seller concessions are. So now when you take a listing, it will say whether they authorize the broker to check that yes or no box on the MLS. Again, every MLS has a different set of rules. That's why they left it. It's not automatic. So it defaults to the seller does not authorize the broker to put that they're willing to consider or offer concessions. So they have to check it. But again, every MLS is different, so that might not even be an option at some point. This is also from the listing agreement. It used to be where you would put the total here, 5%, and then below you would put how much you were willing to pay the buyer's agent. That is now gone. It is specifically dealing with how much the seller is willing to pay just the seller's broker. This here is a percentage you would put in if a buyer came unrepresented. Not dual agency, only unrepresented, because it is assumed that if you have an unrepresented buyer come in, that as the listing agent, you're going to be doing extra work anyway. You're going to be opening the house. You're going to be there for inspections. You're not there to negotiate anything on the behalf of the sellers or the buyers, but you're going to need to be there to kind of be the middleman and facilitate the transaction. So that's where it's saying, seller, if a buyer comes up unrepresented, you're going to owe me 2.5 plus another 1% for my extra work.
Hi, Renee, when a buyer comes without an agent, are they responsible to hire their own inspectors and so forth?
Technically, yes. Carr said you can hand them a blank contract, a blank RPA, you're able to do that, but they have to fill it out. So.
Yeah.
So they have to put in their own offer.
They'd have to put in their own offer.
They're on their
with
own.
their own terms.
They're on their own.
If you want to take that chance, that's why it's so important to have that conversation of what your value is. I mean, that's pretty much what the whole big crux of this is you need to prove your value in what you do. It's not just let me go show you an open house. There's so much more that goes into it. Yeah.
Does the association allow a realtor to give out the blank form?
No, the association, I think they would have to get it from an agent. I don't think they do blank forms at the California Association or at the local boards anymore.
The form is belonging to the association,
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
So if the realtor give out the blank form,
Yes.
that form is belonging to the association. Now my question is, does the association allow that realtor to give out the blank form to the
To the buyer.
unrepresented buyer?
And yes, per car, you can give, I would put at least in the address and the buyer's name. I wouldn't have it completely blank. I would have information in there, but they said yes, if an unrepresented buyer comes in,
Okay.
you as the listing agent can hand them a blank form to help facilitate them presenting the offer. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So again, continuing with that additional compensation for the seller, the 1%. So can that be switched over to a dual agent to do representation if you want?
If you're going to be a dual agent, you are going to have that. You're going to have the buyer sign that other form, the buyer broker agreement,
Okay.
and decide what you want to charge as a dual agent.
Oh. In addition to the 1%, that's just a separate agreement.
Yeah, I mean, you can also take that out. You can modify anything. You can modify down. Car says modify down, don't modify up. You can't modify your BRBC. But what you would do, I mean, that's a conversation that I would have with my seller. If I am a dual agent, would you be willing to pay a total of 4%?
Right.
And then you would submit your offer, and we'll go over that form to submit the offer with the seller paying the compensation. So yeah, this is a lot of extra paperwork for not a lot of changes, because most sellers are still willing to pay. So there's just all these little things that are getting, that we have to make sure to check off and do for essentially the status quo. Julie?
Let's say I'm not gonna meet my 3 months, it's not gonna close within that time frame. Can I just do an ETA, or do I need to redo this whole form again?
As long as as long as you're in escrow, you wouldn't have to modify that BRBC. If you're in escrow already,
Yeah.
and it's going to close, it's just if you're in escrow, you wouldn't have to modify or extend it.
You would not have to. Okay.
But there is a new modification, it's a specific modification for this BRBC. It's called the modification to the BRBC. So they made it specifically to extend it.
Okay, thanks.
It'll say the new representation agreement. And you had a question here in the,
Yeah, I was just saying, a lot of the buyer's agents that I work with feared that the buyers would just go work directly with the listing agent. But the listing agent still has to have this form in place to get their commission.
if they represent the buyer, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
they're gonna have that form in place regardless.
Mhm.
Who they work with.
And it could say 0% if they go directly. Your BRBC could say 0% if you want it to. If they're gonna, if they're getting paid 2.5 by the seller and they don't want to get paid anymore, they could do a 0% buyer representation agreement.
The listing agent.
Yes.
Are you finding that in the areas where the properties are in high demand, that it's actually the seller's market, that some sellers are not willing to pay the buyer's agent's commission?
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
So like I said, 45 days in, that's kind of where we were, that was my next slide. Are the sellers still willing to pay? From what I'm seeing, yes. I've talked to a couple lenders today and went out to the exhibit hall. They are starting to see contracts where the buyers are paying. But that's also nationwide, whereas California, it's a little bit harder to do that because our prices are so high and buyers don't have an extra $25,000 just sitting in their bank account to pay an agent. So it might be a trickle-down effect. So far, every agent that I've talked to is really pushing their seller to pay the commission still, and the sellers are usually willing to do it. If they're educated enough and they understand the whole scheme of things. I think that's what's, that's another way you prove your value as a buyer's agent, is explaining this in a way that is not scary. Because before we could go to a house, we could just take our buyers in, show them a house with no, you know, they didn't know us anything. Now we can't show them a house unless they promise to pay us. So it's a conversation that needs to be, and they have a ton of scripts out there. Todd Swanson gave me the Loan Atlas. He's gonna try to get me a link and I'll send it out. But he said they came up with a great script for buyer's agents and how he's very into coaching and he has a lot of experience, and he said it's a great script for a buyer's agent, buyer's agent conversation.
If I have a previous client who's just interested in a property, not sure if they're going to buy, no plans on it, and they just want some details, can I give them those details, talk to the agent, get the details, and reply back to my agents without filling this out? Reply back to my client?
Yeah, this is just before you show them, you can talk about the market, you can talk about properties just before there's any sort of tour or entry. And there is a watered down version of this form, and I have to think what it's called. The PS, it's a 2-page version of this where it lists specific properties versus this is more San Diego County
Generalized.
Generalized. It'll be very, if you meet someone at a restaurant and they're like, I want to go see a house tomorrow, you're an agent, will you take me?
Right.
That would probably be the better form because you're only showing them that one house. And then you could put, well, if I get this house, it's 2.5%.
I was in a webinar and they mentioned like a 1-day form, but it was state specific, so I see California doesn't have that.
That's
Like
the,
a 1 day.
yeah, no, that one was, this new one, I have to think of what the acronym is, there's so many.
PRPS one?
No, it's a property advice, it's like a 1 day, it's like, it does have an expiration, but it's not just 1 day. But it lists 3 specific properties. And if you want to do more, they said I would get 1 signed for every 3 properties. Don't just attach a list.
And isn't that what they're using for folks that are holding open houses, have that?
That's another form. That's the open house non-agency form. So if you walk into an open house, the agents, this is like these 29 forms.
Oh, jeez.
I hope you like acronyms because they're just.
Will you be sending us an email with all this information?
Yes.
Can
Yes.
we get a
The
copy
full
of the
names
PowerPoint?
and what they need? Okay.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you. The new ones?
Yes, I will send the name of that form.
So the open house, what?
She also
so
plans to do a follow-up webinar.
Yes, I'm going to do a follow-up webinar.
So if you host an open house,
There is a form that you have to have the seller sign. Buyer, potential visitors. It's the open house, like visitor non-agency form. Something
so they
along
come
those
in
lines.
unrepresented, they have to
Yes.
sign that.
So if they don't sign that non-agency form, they are not allowed to get into the door?
Technically, you're not. Technically, you're supposed to have that signed before they come in the door.
Wow.
So if they refuse to sign that, we have to tell them they cannot come in to our open house.
I mean, essentially, I would guess so. I mean,
Thank you.
yeah, it's not a lot of paper, a lot of extra paperwork, a lot of extra fun. So many of you are probably familiar with this form. This is the form that you submit with offers when you're asking the seller to pay. So in the RPA now they added, this box has actually been there for quite a while. I think CAR knew that this was coming, so they added this box, I think, to the RPA update 2 years ago, but no one used it or paid attention to it. So now this is the box that says seller agrees to pay the obligation of buyer to compensate buyer's broker under a separate agreement. And this is the form that you would submit. And again, this amount here cannot exceed the amount you have in your buyer agreement. You will be required to submit the BRBC. The last page where it confirms the commission, you have to send it. Escrow is now asking for these forms as of a couple weeks ago. Tammy just mentioned she has her escrow officer. She says, I'm having a hard time getting the BRBC from some agents.
In Idaho, we're able to do an addendum to that form if the seller's paying 3%. So are you able to do an addendum here? So if you pay 2.5, are you able to do an addendum to 3%?
Carr said no, you can't go up.
Okay.
You can't modify your BRBC up.
But if
Which
the
is-
seller's willing to pay you more than what you have, then you get that. Do you get the higher amount?
No.
You get whatever's
Whatever
lowest,
is in your BRBC, that's the max.
Max.
That's the max you
no
can
matter
have.
what they're paying.
Yeah, no matter what they pay.
But you can modify it down.
Yes. I just modified one down because the seller only was willing to pay 2. My agent's doing the loan, and instead of his 2.5, we just modified it to say the buyer is not responsible for paying that 0.5 overage that the seller is not paying.
Is there a specific form for that?
Modification of the BRBC. The modification of
It's
the
amazing
BRBC.
how many letters you like
Oh,
have in your brain.
I know. We love acronyms at C2, so yeah. So what if? Here's a couple what ifs. This is really important, I think, and I had to go on a webinar where they specifically dealt with this. So just like a contract, the buyer has 5 days to show you that they have funds to pay you. So within 5 days, they either send sort of like a proof of funds. They need to show you a bank statement that they are going to be able to cover not only their closing costs, but have the funds to pay you as well. If they don't, you can check this box here. Buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay broker. You are still going to put in that 2.5% in there just to protect your commission. But if they don't have enough money in their bank account, you want to check this box because this protects you as well. What you're promising here in this, it references that section. You're promising to submit offers that are asking the seller to pay that obligation. All of your offers will have that in there. If the seller comes back and says, we're not paying a commission, you as the agent have the right to walk away from that transaction because no one is expected to work for free. If you want to modify your BRBC to lower the commission and the buyer has maybe enough to pay you 1%, you can do that. But this gives you the option to back out of that property, that specific property only, if the buyer doesn't have the funds and then the seller is not willing to pay.
So this one is in which form? On the purchase contract?
This one.
Or on this one?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Got it.
In G2.
G2.
Mm-hmm.
Renee, the piece where it says that an unrepresented, you'll pay me at 1% for an unrepresented buyer, is that new? Was that the old?
No, that was not on the RPA, no.
So that kind of like, if, for example, if a listing agent puts 2% on there, that really kind of does reduce risk for them because if they do have an unrepresented buyer, they don't have to be a dual agent and they still get paid.
Right. But that buyer has to be willing to say, okay, well, I want this property bad enough to go unrepresented.
Right.
And this, in this case, if that's checked, you can walk away.
To see the property, to walk in the door, they have to fill out a form that says I'm unrepresented.
The buyer?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, they'll have to modify this to go, well, when they make an offer, they'll have to, say you already made the offer and the seller comes back and says we're not going to pay, you would have to basically say, you would have to do an addendum and say you are unrepresented and the agent has the right to remove themselves from the transaction. Another thing I'm going to bring up since we're talking about this BRC, I don't have a slide for it, but I just talked to another agent about it. So if you want to cancel an exclusive agreement, you have to have a 30-day cancellation period. You have to give them a 30-day notice, basically. If it's non-exclusive, you guys can just cancel it. So I have an agent that called me and said, hey, I have a buyer that now wants to work with me. She has an exclusive agreement already with another agent. That other agent will not let her out of her contract. So she will have to wait that 30 days.
After the 3 months, I'm having this situation or something else I thought to
Not the 3 months. You just have, just from effective notice of cancellation.
Okay, so I'm in this situation right now. So they're in contract with her, and then, but they still have like a month and a half. So they need to give that agent a 30-day notice, and then.
Unless it's mutual. If it's a mutual, if they will let each other out of the contract, there is a specific box you can check that says, we mutually agree and this is over.
She's not.
But in this case, this other agent says, to let you out of the contract, you need to pay me $1,000 or we're gonna stay in this contract for the 30 days.
So that voids the 90 days when you do
Yes.
a 30-day notice?
Yes, yes.
So to qualify and make sure the point you just made. So it means this agreement protect the buyer agent, the broker, only for 30 days, I mean, only 30 days after notice. Is that correct?
If you want to cancel,
Because let's say I'm the buyer broker, and
Right.
then we sign a contract, and then we have the mutual agreement with the buyer. But as you said, the buyer has the right to cancel it, but we have to wait for 30 days. So it means my right as 30 days only after the notice. Even I do not agree,
correct.
I don't want to
Correct.
cancel.
Even if you don't want to cancel, say they cancel a week after, and you have a 90-day,
Uh-huh.
it's effective 30 days after they give you notice.
Yeah, I only have 30
So
days.
yes, you only have 30 days, yes,
Thank you.
yes.
So like
yes.
in my situation, because I'm on the side where they want to cancel with them and
Mhm.
come to me, so and it's not going well. So they have the option for that agent can ask them to pay them. What would you say? And they can just make up any random amount of money.
I would never do business like that
Nor would I.
because I don't believe in that. If it's not a nice, harmonious
it's
relationship.
a family member. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't even, that pretty much stalls your buyers for 30 days though, because
Right.
if they
Okay.
acquire, even get into contract, even if it doesn't close, if you get into escrow, you're still obligated under that.
Okay.
Even if another agent is your agent at that time. It's acquire, lease, anything that's protecting the original exclusive agreement.
Yeah.
How does this impact holding open houses and people that just walk in off the street?
So there's a
Neighbors,
open
just
house,
leave loose.
they're technically supposed to sign the open house visitor non-agency form. Forms.
Sorry, you can't walk in
Right.
unless you
And so
sign
what
the
do you do?
form.
What do you do with those forms as the realtor who's holding that open house? You just have to save them
Yep.
and just
And probably give them to your broker and, yeah.
It could help you get a lot of leads.
Yeah, it could, you have a lot of information on there.
Oh, well, that's
Okay,
a good
add your,
point.
add your
See,
email,
someone
please.
you. Always.
And just now we are talking about 30 days cancellation thing.
Yes,
So does it have the tail clause? So in other words, for example, like I'm a broker and she's the buyer, and then we sign the contract, and then we for 7 days already. But within these 7 days, I show her a house which the address is ABC, and then after the 7 days, and she
she buys it with someone else that you're asking?
No. So after 7 days, she canceled our agreement, and then 35 days later, after 30 days, and she is with a different broker wrote a contract to buy that property. So
There is a clause in there, it's the front page, what is
Tail.
it?
So you're saying like the same property?
Same
Like,
property, I
You were the
showed.
first one that
The
showed
carrying
them?
Yeah.
cost.
But then,
You're asking a carrying cost question, right?
yes.
So
because right now
yes.
there is no more procuring cost
Well, see,
anymore.
4C, the continuation period shall be 30 days, and if you go to the continuation, it's on E3. So 4C of the contract
Which
goes
page?
over the continuation of right for compensation for
Which
broker.
page?
Page 2,
Page 2?
4C.
4C. Okay.
But if
4C.
buyer enters into an agreement to acquire property which there was broker involvement,
Oh.
but that protects you put whatever you want in there. 30 days, 60, I would say 30 is probably standard. So if she did it if you had 30 in there and she did it at day 35, you're not entitled to the commission. It's same thing with the listing agreement. You know, they put in that if they sell to a buyer that saw it when you had your listing and you gave them a list and that buyer was on that list, they're still obligated to pay you a commission on the listing side.
I know.
What about putting somebody on a list for homes that meet their criteria? Do you need an agreement for that if they're just getting emails of the listings that are coming up?
I would. I don't think it's required because you're not showing a virtual tour or anything like that.
It's not against the rules
No.
to do that.
No, it's before you enter, show them a virtual tour, but I think an email drip is probably fine, like an auto email before you have a buyer broker agreement.
What if you're holding an open house and the people entering the house refuse to sign any forms? Do you stop them from actually seeing the house?
That's a great question. That's a question I'm gonna have to look into from Carr.
Because, like, the neighbors come and they want to, like, looky-loos, and, like, they're not really.
Carr has represented, if you're
Right.
holding the open house, you have to ask them to sign it, they're welcome to refuse and still see the home. Carr has weighed an opinion on that.
Okay.
So if somebody goes see an open house and signs, says I'm unrepresented, and comes back a week later and makes an offer with an agent, the listing agent can say what? Can say, you're unrepresented and therefore I get.
No, they were just unrepresented at that moment.
Okay.
Yes, they were just unrepresented at that moment, not, Yeah, because all the, if I see a house and I went in and then I have to call my best friend who's an agent, I probably don't have a BRBC signed yet, but I will prior to making an offer. This is what if the seller won't pay the commission. We kind of went over some of these. The buyer will be obligated to pay you as per the BRBC. You can modify the BRBC, and you can always use a closing cost credit to help cover the buyer's cost.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, say they come to your open house sometime, we need to talk about this another time, fine. Like, say you have an open house, they come in unrepresented, they sign your thing, then they decide they want to put in an offer, then they go find another agent, but you're the one that showed them the house first.
That's
pretty much what he was saying earlier, that's procuring costs, but that's where that date was, where she said on page 2, that is taking.
But then they go and get another agent, and so does it?
It's still that 30 days.
still-
Look, bottom line is, if
Okay.
a buyer doesn't want to work with you and they want to get out of it, you're seeing the other end of it, they're going to get out of it.
Okay.
If they want to wait the time frames, they're getting out of it. It
But if-
puts some power to their side.
That as a listing agent at open house, if you know and you can get them to sign a BRBC, and you guys have I would get them to sign a BRBC and say, if you like this house, let me sign a non-exclusive or the one-page form that says, if you make an offer on this house, let's sign this paper, the P, now I have to think, property,
Yeah.
and put that one property on there,
Oh, okay.
and say, I will represent you if you make an offer on this house.
Perfect.
That's like sort of that would be like a salesy tactic, but that protects you as if they don't have an agent.
Yeah, okay.
So correct me if I'm wrong, to address their question. So it means the action, you're showing the house, the action,
Right?
and the procuring clause has gone, and right now only thing count is contract signed. Is that correct? Only thing count is contract signed, action counts nothing.
Actually, well, there's a page that now they say what broker involvement is. And it depends on what kind of agreement you have, exclusive or non-exclusive. So if you have an exclusive agreement, there's a list of what is considered broker involvement, and the buyer will be required to pay you if you have done A, B, or C.
I got you.
So as long as it's in the time frame though.
As long as it's in your time frame, yes.
If it
As
goes
long as
beyond the time frame, procuring cost does have an expiration. Like, he's coming around, you're asking the same thing, it's the same answer. You know what I'm saying? You're saying, I'm still gonna get procuring cost till Jesus comes. No,
No.
the time.
So if it's 30, if it stops on 30 days and she makes an offer on 31, you're not entitled to the
I
commission.
got you.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
Just a quick question, are buyer's agents calling the listing agents ahead to find out what the sellers are willing to pay before they show?
I feel like that's they probably are, but I wouldn't suggest it because I think I had one of my agents get yelled at by a listing agent when they called. He goes, I said, you can, that's why I'm hoping that yes or no doesn't go away because that alleviates sort of an awkward conversation.
Right.
I'm sure it's happening, but I would suggest making the offer with your SPVB in there, and as long as it's not a crazy seller's market, you're probably going to get a counter, but most are willing to
Call
pay.
the listing agents and let them know, I'm writing an offer, and so it might come up in the conversation, I guess.
Well, this is kind of ways that people are getting creative.
Did you see the reel?
You're
where
going to
they
see.
put there's a key in the super box. Did you see the reel? There's like a super box, and they open the key, and the key has like a keychain on it that says 3%.
So these are the new sign writers. You see this really small little sign. I had to put it on my phone what it said because I was like, I can't read that. it says something on the way bottom, and I don't know why they would even print that on there, that says that it's basically contingent upon the written agreement between the buyer and the buyer's agent. Yes, we'll pay you, but asterisk, we're not gonna pay you more than what you have in your buyer broker agreement.
So that's gonna be for sale right or something?
These are for sale. This is from D-Sign. I pulled this from their website, yeah.
Oh my
These
gosh.
are their new sign writers.
So they can't put it on the listing in the MLS, but they can put it on the sign in front of the house?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
But that sign can't appear on the MLS.
Right, okay.
So that sign can't be your front.
In your picture,
In
when
your
there was a
picture.
photographer.
Yes, yeah, put it on after you put your picture in.
This is
Believe-
crazy.
So are we going back to the day of wink wink?
Sort of, that's what, but there's a concessions in MLS is the code word for we're gonna pay your commission. But like I said, Barry's, you're up in the, they're taking that off as of today. I got an email, Barry's is not gonna put anything about compensation whatsoever, or concessions. Concessions is the new code word, they're not putting that anywhere on the MLS.
So like you said, can you call the agency and say, hey, I'm about to write you an offer since you're in various and we know that, like, can you have that conversation and say?
You can't, I wouldn't say, are you paying 2.5%? What
No,
are you
yeah,
paying? I would
right.
say, is the seller willing to consider offers with concessions?
Right, okay.
That's sort of the
wording.
Yeah, that's the wording. I get these in my email all the time, 3% cooperating broker compensation available. It's sort of like, it's the same sign writer thing. So this just cannot be linked to anywhere on your IDX on your website. That can't be, it can't, from the MLS, they can't be advertised anywhere like this. It all has to be kind of under the
It's
table.
all comes down to MLS. When you you can have your own website with all the commissions you're paying on every property. You can say, here's 100 properties, we're paying commissions on these 80, these 20 are not.
Well, we were
Just
talking about
MLS.
that, putting a Cal State, putting a section on the Cal
Oh.
State website. Here's the ones that we're offering, and you guys could put a link to that on your own website. Here's all the, here, to put our name out there as a company that's willing to pay commissions.
Right. So you put something like this on your social media?
Yes. As long as it's not linked to your MLS, you can yeah.
Wow.
So this new form, can it act as a buyer's exclusive agreement type of thing? or
It's
not?
this basically took over the buyer's exclusive. This is the new one.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But like we talked about earlier, it does default to non-exclusive unless you check the exclusive box.
Okay, so like if they go to open house and the listing agent's like, oh, if you use me, they try to dual agency it, that's just, that form is like your thing, right?
The listing agent will have to get that signed by the buyer if they want to represent the buyer, yeah.
But because you already had it signed ahead of time, like sometimes you can't go to every open house and you have the buyers go say, hey, just go look at that open house because I don't need to go with you, whatever. And they do that and the listing agent's trying to, do dual agency with them.
Well, you need to educate your buyer. That's why it's so important that you have to say, you are signing an exclusive agreement with me. You can't sign.
I just want to let you guys know this sounds like it's super productive, so keep this going. But if you are trying to catch the Master the Heckham, the Teen Cave, that one's going to start in about 2 minutes or so. So now's your chance to catch that. Otherwise, stay in.
That is awesome.
So if you guys have anything you want to, Shane, thank you. Do you have anything you wanted to add something? Shane had some really valuable things to
I
say.
just would say, I hate talking all the time, getting to know it all. It's just, we're really, because I'm a broker in Idaho and here. And in Idaho, I come up with some clever ideas, and they're coming up with them everywhere. My wife's a broker, and we have seen, our brokerage has about, we're has about 1,200 agents, and we have come up with creative ideas too. The biggest thing is, this is a good thing. We're all so scared about it. I think there's a lot of fear. It's a good thing because buyers and sellers have to realize there is negotiating power of commission. There's been a price fixed business. And that's why the MLS has taken such a strong stance. Now you might not think it's a good thing. But in reality, in the long run, it'll help buyers and sellers be able to realize we can negotiate how we want to do this. I mean, even agents, we don't want to pay 6% to sell our own homes. I mean, it's been like, we said things, even on our call, we don't mean to. It's easy to say, well, it's kind of like the standard.
Right.
Those are the terms that get us in trouble. Well, my brokerage doesn't allow me to. You remember those kind of conversations? And that's just stuff that tainted the industry. As you can see, capitalism finds a workaround about anything.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the workaround. So I would finish with this to say, unscare people, because there's lots of ways to get it done. You can have these commissions covered in loans. Many of us could, even a heck of, we can get 6% coverage in fees on reverse by the seller. Okay? You could up the price and say, I'll pay everything. There's lots of ways to get it done. On a VA loan, you're talking about 4%, I believe. On an FHA 4 it is as well. On your conventional mortgages, you got 3%. There's lots of ways to finance this in. My idea will tell you this: if you do loans, unscare your realtors by saying, I got your back. You're going to get paid working with me. Your buyer can't afford to pay you. I got a lot of clever ways on how to get you paid. Work with me, and I'll help you get paid. Now, I can't guarantee you every single person, because some people we're not going to be able to get a program to work. But almost all of them we can. Just let them know, I got your back. I know how to negotiate these. I know how to help you. I understand the forms. So if you're doing loans as well, man, people, the one scare, you just get the fear out of the room. Say, we got it. This is going to put your buyer in control. This is going to help your buyer buy this house more than ever before. It's not less control, it's more control.
Yeah.
You know, I've used it as a little, like, even for my daughter. I was talking to my daughter about this one because she hears us talking all the time, and my daughter's just becoming a surgeon. And I was talking, she goes, Dad, this is kind of unique. I said, I want to create a version of this for you to use when you're dating guys and say, listen, are you buying dinner or not? I want to know now. Tell me before we go. You know, I'm joking around, but it's putting you in control. And we're looking at it only from our perspective. Our buyers can win deals. They can get better pricing. The sellers can pay less if they need to or have to. How many people would love to sell their house, but they can't afford 6? So when you start looking at this, open your eyes up how to remove the fear, so your good questions, know the form backwards and forwards, and go help people.
Thank you, Shane.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be scary. It's a lot, you know, I think you're having to build your trust with your buyers earlier than you would have to before, but it can be a very productive, you know, conversation. You guys can share, I wanted to share a couple funny stories that my first offer that we got, we were representing the seller. It was August 18th, this went into effect August 17th. The sellers, it was a $685 listing price. We got a full price offer, $685, 1% closing cost credit, no commission being paid to the buyer's agent, and they sent their BRBC with the offer. So our assumption was, well, you're clearly showing that your buyer is obligated to pay 3%. You're not asking the seller to pay 3%. You put in a full price offer with a 1% credit. That's a great offer. Keller Williams agent. Not to throw anyone under, but like somebody that's supposed to be well seasoned, right, and well trained. We open escrow, we're getting paid 2%. We put in the opening email, buyer's agent to pay buyer's agent 3%. 2 weeks into escrow, he calls, oops, I meant to have the seller pay my commission of 3%. And we're like, sorry, the offer's already accepted. You now have to either go back to your buyer and say, I made a huge mistake. You owe me 3%, but it was a VA buyer, so I really doubt they had $17,000, $18,000 to pay. So my agent, bless her heart, she's like, it's a VA buyer. We want them to have this house. They've done their due diligence. They've already paid for their inspection. She's like, I'll give $3,000 in my commission, and my seller is willing to give $3,000. So that buyer's agent got $6,000 instead of $16,000. But that was, you know, a $10,000 mistake for not knowing the forms and not submitting the offer correctly. So that was like day one. And I told my agent, I have a feeling this is too good to be true. I'm like, you can go to the buyer's agent and say, did you mean for it to be like this? And I was like, but that could also backfire, and then your seller is going to get a much lesser offer. So we got a better deal for her seller in the end, but it's, you know, it's those kind of roadblocks that we're going to run into and kind of try to navigate, because not all agents are going to know these forms inside and out, and mistakes are going to be made. So I feel like education in this sense is power, and having weekly calls about what we're running into and things is going to be really important. Call.
So if you're the listing agent and the buyer's agents call you and say, hey, let's just talk frankly, is your seller willing to pay my commission and what percentage? Are you allowed to have that conversation?
You are, but it's not, Carr told me this, there are people out there fishing for people to make mistakes.
I got you.
So I would
Yeah.
tread lightly
Like
and
MLS.
keep it as concession, yes, my seller's willing to pay, willing to consider offers with concessions. That's the safe way to say it.
Yeah.
That's my new tagline.
Say one more time, so I will write it down.
The seller, is the seller willing to consider offers with concessions? Because the word compensation and commission is like, don't even say it anymore.
So like that conversation that some agents, buyer's agents have with the listing agent, I want to write this offer one time. Let me know, let's just figure out what we're gonna put on this offer so we don't have to go back and forth with counters. Then you kind of need to know a little bit.
Well, this is what when it becomes a seller's market and things are gonna get competitive, it's gonna be hard to navigate. So that's when you need to know your worth and need to know, hey, buyer, I'm gonna fight really hard for you, but if we end up only getting a 1% commission, can you pay me the other 1%? That's when being a loan officer and a real estate agent both helps a lot, because you have a lot more flexibility in your credits and being, the one-stop person.
Did this case go to Supreme Court or was it like the lower courts? This NAR case?
Well, they settled outside. It was small. It was a class action lawsuit, and then they.
How long was it in litigation for? Or like
2019, I think, is when the original lawsuit. So 5 years.
I guess did NAR fight hard enough for this, or were they just like they just gave up because there's like.
I think it kind of steamrolled over the 5 years. Like there was class action lawsuits that just kept building and building and building, and they thought, I'm not gonna, $418 million, I think they settled for.
There's a lot of folks who are now challenging the decision. So the decisions can get flopped. It can change, which is what we're living with now.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
As a loan officer, not someone who's doing real estate, are you seeing loan approvals getting derailed because of this agreement, like buyer's agents aren't cleaning a property or properly or not cleaning at all?
I don't think on the loan side, I mean, the lenders just said that they're just starting to see buyer paid compensation. So that's more of a lender question. I don't have any deal. I have one deal where the buyer's agent is waiving the commission, but they did it to make it work, and I assume they have some, and we're the listing side.
You just gotta redisclose. You gotta redisclose.
Yeah, it has to show, so, and Penny Mac gave me, because I asked, I was gonna do what lenders are saying slide, but there's not much that has changed, honestly, besides the fact that the VA, you can pay, let me see where did I put all of that. VA borrowers can pay the commission now. It's not a non-allowable anymore. I'll just read this so you guys can, from a lender perspective. Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA have said it's allowed for buyers to pay the real estate commissions. If the buyer is paying for it, it needs to be broken out on the sales contract per the BRBC. So lenders will probably start requiring that form if the buyer is paying. And must be disclosed on the LE in section H and paid with verifiable funds, either seller credit, seller paid, lender's premium pricing, or borrower liquid funds. So that's really the lender update that I got. Yes.
To qualify on what you just read,
Mm-hmm.
so you mean if buyer is paying X amount, and let just make up an example,
Sure.
$1,000.
Sure.
For the buyer broker, she's the buyer broker.
Right.
So you mean, and then he's the lender.
Okay.
He need to see that $1,000.
So we call it source and seasoning. Typically,
Yeah,
60-day
seasoning.
source and seasoning. You can't just come up with it from a shoebox.
Yeah, it has to be
Come from
like verifiable funds.
Okay. So
Yes.
that will make more burden on the borrower or the buyer.
Oh yeah.
Or you could do a gift. So.
And the agents, they need to know, like their realtors are not, they need to know they need to give that information to
Yes.
the lenders.
Yes.
Because then it's gotta be on LE.
Yeah. And they have to see the BRBC.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
That's
And these are a few resources if you want to read 119 FAQs from NAR. Just when I went, I was like, let me read, and I was like, 119. Wow, that's a lot. They do break it down sort of by section, so you can like go to, you know, they break it out. But 119, that's quite a few. And they do have a free, I don't know if you're CAR members or not, they have a free bundle. I took this class, it's a free buyer representation. You know, you don't get any credit for it or anything, but it's a good, it goes over these forms line by line.
Can we make a PDF of the?
Yeah, we'll put this, I think we're gonna put all these on the website.
So we need to make a Trivial Pursuit game of car bingo. All these.
There's your other class dismissed. Let's hope it's almost happy hour.
I have extra drink tickets if you need one.
Yeah, and I'll be here if you guys have any questions. It's.
Hey, if you're not a loan officer, call me. Thank you.
I wish I had more fun things to present on, but this is here to stay.